You didn't lose them. You lost the version of them your mind created when your heart was desperate for meaning. And that's why this pain feels confusing instead of clean. Because when someone leaves, you can still hope they'll return. But when the illusion dies, there is nothing to chase anymore. Only truth standing where fantasy used to live. The hardest pain is not abandonment. It's realizing you were loving something that never fully existed. You weren't holding a person as they truly were. You were holding promises, potential, and imagined futures. Allah didn't break your heart by removing them. He broke the lie your heart was surviving on. There is a unique silence that comes after illusion collapses, not the silence of missing someone, but the silence of seeing clearly for the first time. It's the moment your heart stops defending them, stops making excuses for inconsistency, stops confusing emotional hunger with destiny. Some pain doesn't come from loss. It comes from awakening, from finally admitting what you refused to see, that the peace you were chasing never lived with them, that the anxiety you felt was never love. And Allah was patient while you caught up to the truth. You thought Allah took something precious away, but Allah only removed what was slowly draining you. You mistook emotional intensity for meaning. You mistook attachment for connection. You mistook longing for love. And Allah refused to let that confusion destroy you further. There were nights you felt unsettled for no clear reason. Moments where your chest tightened without explanation. That wasn't love speaking. That was your soul warning you. Allah speaks through discomfort before He speaks through removal. You just didn't want to listen yet. Illusions feel beautiful because they don't require accountability. They don't demand consistency, effort, or truth. They survive on hope, not reality. But Allah does not build your future on fantasies. He builds it on clarity, even when clarity hurts. That's why the illusion had an expiration date. You kept telling yourself patience would fix everything. But patience is not meant to excuse emotional neglect. Patience is meant to protect dignity, not erase it. Allah saw you shrinking to keep something alive. And Allah does not let what harms your worth survive forever. So He intervened. When illusion exists, the heart stops asking real questions. It avoids facts and clings to feelings. It prefers comfort over truth. Allah loves you too much to let your heart stay asleep. So He shook the foundation you built on imagination. Not to punish you, but to wake you. You weren't attached to them. You were attached to who you thought you'd become with them. The life you pictured. The version of yourself you hoped to escape into. Allah didn't destroy your future. He prevented you from building it on someone unstable. Sometimes Allah lets attachment grow just enough. Enough for you to feel it deeply. Enough for the lesson to leave a permanent mark. So you never confuse intensity with alignment again. So you never mistake anxiety for destiny again. So you never betray your peace for hope again. This pain is not random. It's precise. It targets exactly where you were deceiving yourself. Where you were romanticizing what required too much sacrifice. Where you were lowering standards to avoid loneliness. Allah removed the illusion before it removed you. You kept asking Allah to fix the situation, but Allah was trying to fix your vision. You wanted the outcome changed. Allah wanted your heart corrected, because a heart that can't see clearly will repeat the same story, just with a different name. There is relief hidden inside this ache. Relief you haven't felt yet because you're still grieving the idea, not the person. Once the fog lifts, you'll notice something shocking. Your chest feels lighter without constant emotional tension. That's not coincidence. That's mercy. Allah never removes without replacing clarity. But clarity arrives quietly, not emotionally. It arrives when you stop romanticizing the past. When you stop rewriting their behavior in your favor. When you stop hoping instead of observing, that's when peace begins to speak. You thought this pain meant you lost something rare, but rare things don't leave you feeling small. They don't confuse you. They don't cost you your self-respect. Allah didn't take something rare from you. He took what was draining you slowly. Illusions survive only when we cooperate with them. When we ignore red flags and call them tests. When we excuse inconsistency and call it destiny. When we call silence patience. Allah stepped in because your heart was too kind to stop. That intervention is not cruelty, it's protection. The collapse of illusion feels like betrayal at first, but later it feels like rescue because you finally stop fighting reality. You finally stop forcing meaning where there is none. You finally stop begging your heart to accept confusion, and Allah gives you rest. This is not the end of your love story. It's the end of a chapter written by imagination. A chapter where you loved harder than you were valued, where you waited longer than you were respected. Allah closed it because it was going nowhere. And Allah does not waste sincere hearts. One day, you'll look back and realize something painful but freeing. If Allah hadn't removed the illusion, you would still be stuck, still explaining, still hoping, still doubting yourself, still calling emotional exhaustion love. Allah saved you from living half alive, even if the rescue hurt at first. What you called love often began as a quiet emptiness you didn't know how to sit with. So when someone arrived and filled that silence, your heart rushed toward relief. Not because they were aligned with your soul, but because the noise inside finally stopped for a moment. That pause felt like safety. And safety, when you've been lonely for too long, feels like love. Love does not feel like fear disguised as excitement. It does not make your chest tighten when messages slow down. It does not make you replay conversations to search for meaning. That constant alertness is not affection. It is your nervous system trying to protect you from abandonment. And need thrives where fear is ignored. You weren't loving them as they were. You were loving how they distracted you from your own unresolved pain. The attention felt like validation. The closeness felt like rescue. But no human is meant to be a remedy for wounds they didn't create. Allah removes people when they become replacements for healing. Need convinces the heart that losing someone is the same as losing stability, so it clings harder, explains more, accepts less, and calls this sacrifice love. But Allah never asks you to bleed emotionally to prove sincerity. Real love doesn't require constant reassurance to survive. It doesn't collapse in silence. It doesn't panic at distance. When peace disappears, something essential is missing. And Allah does not build futures on emotional chaos. He interrupts before damage becomes permanent. You started confusing emotional intensity with depth, strong feelings with strong foundations, long conversations with long-term compatibility. But intensity rises quickly and burns out just as fast. Depth grows slowly and brings calm. Allah separates the two, so you don't mistake sparks for stability. Need trains the heart to tolerate uncertainty as normal, to wait endlessly without clarity, to call confusion testing. But Allah does not test hearts by starving them of respect. He tests them by strengthening their trust in Him. That's why the illusion could not last. You kept giving more, hoping the relationship would stabilize. More patience, more understanding, more silence. But love is not maintained by self-erasure. Allah ends connections where you are the only one holding it together. What you feared losing was not them. It was the version of life you imagined through them, the future you escaped into mentally, the sense of being chosen. Allah didn't destroy that future. He protected you from building it on someone unstable. Need feels urgent. Love feels grounded. Need says, now or never. Love says, if it's written, it will arrive peacefully. If your attachment felt rushed and anxious, Allah was already warning you before removing them. You were afraid to let go because letting go meant facing yourself, your thoughts, your quiet, your unhealed spaces. But solitude with Allah is safer than closeness built on fear. Allah chose the path that would actually heal you. Need romanticizes inconsistency. It turns waiting into loyalty, silence into mystery, distance into destiny. But Allah does not hide guidance inside emotional confusion. He makes truth clear when you're ready to see. You called it love because love sounds pure. But need hides behind pure language to survive. It says, I'm patient when it's afraid to be alone. I'm loyal when it's emotionally dependent. Allah exposed this so you stop betraying yourself gently and start honoring yourself fully. Love does not ask you to shrink, to be kept. It does not reward silence with crumbs of attention. It does not make you question your worth. Anything that slowly erodes your self-respect is not love. Allah removes what quietly destroys dignity, even if your heart resists at first. This separation is not teaching you to love less. It is teaching you to love correctly, without fear, without obsession, without dependence. Allah is preparing your heart for a love that feels safe, not consuming. That preparation always begins with truth. Once need dissolves, clarity returns. Your standards rise back to where they belong. Your peace stabilizes. You stop being impressed by attention alone. And that is when Allah knows your heart is ready, not for illusion, but for something real. Illusions never disappear without warning. They collapse only after Allah sends signs again and again. The problem was never that the signs were missing. The problem was that your heart kept rewriting them. Every discomfort became something you explained away, and every red flag became something you learned to tolerate. There were moments you felt unsettled for no clear reason. Times your chest tightened, even when nothing bad happened. That was not imagination. That was your fitra reacting to misalignment. Allah placed those signals inside you as protection, but you trained yourself to ignore them. You noticed the inconsistency early on, the effort that came and went, the warmth that felt conditional, the closeness that appeared only when it was convenient. But instead of asking hard questions, you made excuses, because excuses felt safer than truth. Your heart kept saying, wait a little more, be patient, they'll change. But patience is not meant to silence discernment. When patience becomes self-betrayal, it stops being a virtue. Allah does not reward blindness disguised as sabr. You felt confusion more than clarity, hope more than certainty, longing more than peace. Those are not neutral emotions. They are indicators. And Allah speaks through emotional imbalance before He speaks through endings. There were signs in the way communication felt draining instead of nourishing. In how you left conversations feeling smaller, not settled. In how you were always the one adjusting. Real alignment does not require constant emotional gymnastics. Allah allowed you to feel that exhaustion so you would eventually stop. You defended them even when no one was attacking. You justified their behavior before it was questioned. That alone was a sign. When the heart feels the need to protect someone constantly, it's usually because something inside already knows the truth. Allah was watching that internal conflict grow. The illusion demanded that you ignore patterns. One good moment was enough to erase 10 painful ones. One kind word reset weeks of emotional distance. That imbalance was not accidental. It was training your heart to accept instability as normal. Allah does not normalize what harms you. You sensed that something was always missing, not dramatically, quietly. A lack of reassurance, a lack of consistency, a lack of emotional safety. Allah was showing you what you would live with long term. The signs also appeared in your prayers. You prayed more from anxiety than trust, more from fear than peace. You weren't asking Allah to bless something that felt whole. You were asking Him to fix something that felt broken. That difference matters. Your intuition kept speaking, but your attachment kept interrupting. Every time clarity came close, hope pulled you back. Hope without evidence becomes denial. Allah does not remove illusions immediately. He gives the heart time to see clearly on its own. You were nearing that clarity. You started feeling guilty for wanting more, for wanting clarity, for wanting consistency. But those are not unreasonable desires. They are basic emotional needs. Allah never shames you for recognizing your worth. There were moments you imagined life without them, and instead of relief, you felt fear. That fear was not love. It was attachment resisting loss of control. Allah uses that fear to show you where you're dependent, so you can become free. The illusion survived because it gave you something to hold on to, even if that thing was uncertain. Uncertainty can feel better than emptiness to an untrained heart. Allah was training you through discomfort, teaching you that clarity is safer than hope built on nothing. But training takes time. The signs appeared in how you stopped being fully yourself. You filtered your words. You softened your needs. You delayed honesty to avoid losing them. When you begin editing your soul to stay connected, Allah sees that as harm, not compromise. You were more anxious than inspired, more watchful than joyful, more careful than confident. Those are not signs of love growing. They are signs of self-protection activating. Allah never asks you to love in survival mode. Even your body knew before your mind accepted it. Tightness, restlessness, fatigue, emotional heaviness. The body recognizes truth long before the ego does. Allah made your body part of the warning system. The illusion ended when excuses could no longer silence reality. When your heart finally grew tired of defending what hurt it, Allah did not end it suddenly. He waited until you were strong enough to survive clarity. Then He removed what you were clinging to, because now you could see. What you're feeling now is not shock, it's recognition. Recognition of all the signs you ignored. And that recognition hurts. But it also frees you from repeating the same mistake. Allah allowed the illusion to break only when the lesson was complete. The signs were always there. Allah never hid them from you. You just needed time to choose truth over comfort. Now that choice has been made for you, not as punishment, but as protection. At some point, every heart asks this question in silence. If Allah knew they weren't right for me, why did He let me feel so deeply? It feels unfair to taste closeness only to lose it, to open your heart only to be told later that it wasn't meant to stay. But Allah does not teach through distance alone. Sometimes He teaches through attachment first. If Allah removed people the moment they showed flaws, you would never learn what your heart attaches to. You would never see where your wounds still live. You would never notice how easily you confuse attention with worth. So Allah allows the feeling to grow, not to trap you, but to reveal you. You needed to see how your heart responds when it feels chosen, how quickly it gives, how deeply it hopes, how much it tolerates to keep connection alive. Those reactions were not about them. They were about what still needed healing inside you. Allah let the attachment form so you could recognize your patterns. The way you overextend, the way you excuse inconsistency, the way you silence your needs to avoid loss. Without attachment, those patterns stay hidden. Exposure is the beginning of correction. This experience showed you where your boundaries dissolve, where your patience becomes self-neglect, where your kindness turns into self-abandonment. Allah does not heal what remains unseen, so He brings it to the surface through people, through emotions, through pain. You also learned what you truly desire. Not just companionship, but safety. Not just love, but consistency. Not just closeness, but peace. Before this, you might have settled for less. Now, your heart knows better. Allah allows attachment because lessons without emotion don't last. Pain etches wisdom deeper than advice ever could. You can hear 1,000 reminders and still repeat the same mistake. But one heartbreak that reveals truth can change your standards forever. That permanence is mercy, even when it hurts. This wasn't about losing them. It was about losing illusions you were willing to live inside. Illusions about how much you should endure, about how little you should ask for. Allah shattered those illusions by letting you feel fully first. So, the lesson would stay. If Allah had removed them early, you would have wondered, what if, for years, your heart would have romanticized the unfinished story. Now, there is no mystery left. Clarity replaced fantasy, and clarity closes doors cleanly. You also learned that intensity is not alignment. Strong feelings do not equal strong foundations. Late-night conversations do not equal emotional safety. Allah let you feel the intensity so you would never confuse it again. Now your heart will seek calm, not chaos. This attachment exposed where your faith leaned on people instead of Allah, where dua became anxious instead of trusting, where your peace depended on someone's presence. Allah does not shame you for this. He corrects it, and correction sometimes requires removal. You learned the cost of placing your emotional center outside yourself, how easily your mood shifted based on their actions, how fragile your peace became. Allah showed you this so you would rebuild your center around Him. That rebuilding cannot happen without collapse first. Allah let you experience the closeness so you would recognize false closeness later, so you would feel the difference between being wanted and being valued, between attention and intention. This discernment is earned, not given, and it always comes through experience. Some lessons cannot be taught gently, not because Allah is harsh, but because the heart is stubborn when it's attached. It clings to hope even when truth is visible. So Allah allows the attachment to run its course until the heart is ready to release. This experience also taught you endurance, but not the kind you should keep using. It showed you how strong you can be. But strength is not meant to be spent surviving emotional neglect. Allah wants your strength used for growth, not tolerance. That realization changes everything. Allah let you feel deeply so you would stop chasing shallow connections. So you would no longer be impressed by charm without commitment. So you would recognize the difference between words and consistency. Your heart now knows what depth actually requires. That knowledge is priceless. This attachment revealed where your self-worth still negotiates, where you accept less to avoid loss. Allah does not condemn you for this. He refines you, and refinement often comes through discomfort. You were not foolish for feeling deeply. You were sincere, and Allah honors sincerity by teaching it truth. This was not a wasted experience. It was an investment in your discernment, one that will protect you going forward. Allah allowed the attachment because the lesson needed to be personal, not theoretical, not borrowed from someone else's story, but written into your own heart. Now that it's written, it cannot be erased, and you will not repeat this mistake unconsciously again. What you gained from this experience will outlast the pain. Your standards have shifted, your awareness has sharpened, your faith is realigning. Allah gave you insight that comfort never could, and insight is a form of mercy. So no, Allah didn't mislead you. He prepared you. prepared you to love with clarity, prepared you to choose peace, prepared you to walk away from illusions faster next time. That preparation required feeling first, then releasing. This was not about them staying or leaving. It was about who you were becoming. Allah is more concerned with your heart than your timeline. And sometimes, shaping the heart requires letting it attach, just long enough to learn and strong enough to let go. When Allah removes someone from your life, He is never only removing a person. He is removing a version of you that was surviving, not thriving. A version that was negotiating its worth for connection. A version that accepted confusion in exchange for closeness. That version cannot follow you into the future. Allah is preparing, so it has to end. You didn't just lose them. You lost the you who waited too long. The you who explained away disrespect. The you who believed love required endurance of pain. Allah saw how much of yourself you were shrinking to stay connected. And Allah does not let sincere hearts disappear quietly. There was a version of you that stayed silent to avoid conflict. That swallowed needs to keep peace. That delayed honesty out of fear of loss. That version learned survival, not strength. Allah removes people when they keep that version alive, because survival mode is not where barakah lives. You became someone who overthought instead of rested, who monitored moods instead of feeling secure, who adjusted constantly instead of being met halfway. That wasn't who you truly are. That was who you became to maintain something unstable. Allah removes instability so your real self can return. Some connections don't end because they're evil. They end because they keep you small. They lock you into patterns of overgiving. They reward you for silence instead of honesty. Allah ends those patterns by removing the environment that sustains them. That removal is not rejection, it's correction. You were becoming a version of yourself that confused patience with self-neglect. That version thought dignity was optional if love was present. Allah does not allow that belief to grow roots, because dignity is not a luxury, it's a requirement. So, Allah cut the tie before that belief hardened into identity. Every attachment shapes behavior. This one taught you to chase reassurance, to doubt yourself, to wait instead of live. Allah removes attachments when they start rewriting your character, because character matters more than chemistry. There was a version of you that thought love should be earned through suffering. That version felt noble in endurance. But Allah does not measure love by how much you endure. He measures it by how much peace it brings. Anything that teaches the opposite must be unlearned. Unlearning often requires separation. Allah also removed the version of you that believed staying was loyalty, that leaving meant failure, that choosing yourself was selfish. Those beliefs keep hearts trapped. Allah breaks them by creating distance. Distance clarifies what closeness hid. You didn't notice how much energy you were losing until it stopped. The constant thinking, the emotional vigilance, the internal negotiations. Allah ended that drain by removing the source. Because drained hearts cannot grow. Some versions of you were born from fear. Fear of being alone. Fear of starting over. Fear of missing your chance. Allah removes situations that feed fear instead of faith. Because fear-driven decisions always repeat pain. You were learning to accept crumbs with gratitude, to celebrate minimal effort, to lower expectations to avoid disappointment. Allah does not let that mindset become permanent. He removes the scenario that normalizes it. That is mercy disguised as loss. When Allah removes someone, He also removes the habits you built around them. The checking, the hoping, the waiting. Those habits kept you emotionally occupied but spiritually stagnant. Allah frees you by breaking the routine. Freedom often feels empty at first. You are not the same person you were before this attachment. And that is intentional. Allah used this experience to burn away softness that turned into weakness. Not kindness, but self-erasure. There is a difference, and now you know it. The version of you that needed them to feel complete had to die, because completion does not come from another human. It comes from alignment with Allah. Allah will not build your future on emotional dependence, so He removes what encourages it. This ending forced you to face yourself honestly, your fears, your patterns, your expectations, without distraction. That confrontation is uncomfortable but necessary. Growth begins there. You are stepping out of a season of endurance and into a season of clarity. Endurance kept you alive. Clarity will let you live. Allah did not bring you this far to keep you in survival mode. He is preparing you for expansion. And expansion requires shedding old skins. What was removed was not love. It was a version of you that loved without protection, that loved without boundaries, that loved at the cost of peace. Allah protects hearts by reshaping how they love. Sometimes that reshaping feels like loss. This separation is not erasing who you were. It's refining who you are becoming. Allah removes what no longer fits the future He sees for you. Even if you're still attached to the past, trust that what's being removed cannot follow you forward. And what remains will be stronger, clearer, and more whole.